Hello, everyone. Imagine you're standing in the middle of a courtroom where the neon lights flicker and the air is thick with tension, ready to explode. This is the story of Eleanor Brooks, a strong female judge facing the greatest challenge of her life, a slap that not only stings physically, but also tests her sense of justice and her pride. But can a slap bring her down, or will it ignite a fierce fighting spirit like never before? Let's step into Savannah, where prejudices and injustices are being laid bare by a woman who never backs down. From the courtrooms to the cobblestone streets, Eleanor fights not just for herself, but for those who have been trampled on. What do you think about the power of courage? Would you dare to stand up when the whole world turns its back on you? Watch this video to explore Eleanor's emotional journey and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Together, we will find the light in the darkness. At the Chatham County Courthouse, the atmosphere felt heavier than usual. The flickering neon lights from outside cast dappled shadows on the gray-tiled floor. Judge Eleanor Brooks, with her long, flowing black hair and bright star-like eyes, was gearing up for her important preliminary hearing. Although she hadn't donned her robe yet, she confidently stepped into the courtroom, where the focused gazes of the audience and attorneys converged. Eleanor was a resilient woman who had faced numerous challenges in her career. And today, she wasn't just representing justice. She was also carrying the weight of the community she served. Meanwhile, Sergeant Nathan Caldwell, a brawny man with a thick beard, sat in the chair beside her, arms crossed, staring at Eleanor with a look of sheer arrogance. It wasn't just an ordinary glance. It was the disdain he reserved for a woman in a position of power, especially since she was a judge. The tension in the room made even the smallest sounds, like the breaths of those around them, feel amplified. Eleanor sensed it, but she remained determined not to let his biases affect her work. When the trial began, everything seemed to unfold normally. Eleanor listened intently to every word from the parties involved, guiding the debate with unwavering confidence. But suddenly, in the midst of the quiet atmosphere, Nathan stood up, pointed at Eleanor, and made a sarcastic remark that sent the entire room into laughter. "You have no right to speak here," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. That ridicule felt like a slap in the face to Eleanor, leaving her feeling flustered and angry. But instead of reacting immediately, she chose to stay calm, knowing that a judge's composure is crucial in a courtroom. But something in Nathan's eyes had changed. He stood up, walked over to Eleanor's desk, and in a moment no one expected, he slapped her across the face. The sound of the slap echoed like thunder on a clear day, silencing everyone in the room. Eleanor felt as if time had stopped. The slap was not just an act of violence. It was a symbol of the prejudices and arrogance that many still held deep inside. She blinked, feeling the sting on her skin, but she refused to let the tears spill over. Instead, she stood tall, her face filled with determination. Everyone around was stunned by Nathan's actions. The lawyers and the audience exchanged glances, unsure of how to react to such a shocking event. Some of them even felt embarrassed for Nathan, while others shot him looks filled with disdain. Eleanor, although her heart was boiling with anger, knew she couldn't let that anger take over. She understood that she needed to act, not just for herself, but for all the women and people of color who had endured similar injustices. "Sergeant Caldwell," Eleanor said, her voice echoing in the quiet room, "your actions not only violate the rules of this court, but also represent a serious affront to my position and to everyone present here." She wasn't just speaking to Nathan. She was addressing all those who had witnessed the event, making it clear that the slap was not merely a personal act, but part of a much larger struggle. Nathan, with a look that couldn't hide his confusion and anger, tried to argue back. but his words sounded like echoes around him, unable to erase the truth that Eleanor had just laid bare. In that moment, Eleanor felt a new strength rising within her. She was no longer just a judge. She was a symbol for the oppressed, for those who had endured discrimination without a voice. Savannah, with its winding streets and historic buildings, witnessed a battle not just in a courtroom, but within the hearts of its people. Nathan's biases and arrogance were part of a larger picture, where human values and justice were being put to the test. Eleanor knew she had to stand firm, not just for herself, but for those who believed in her. She looked Nathan straight in the eye, no longer afraid, but filled with a fierce determination. In that moment, she realized that slap couldn't bring her down. Instead, it ignited a fire in her heart, a fire to fight for justice, for equality, and for the future she dreamed of. Eleanor stood in the cramped little room, where pressure and tension radiated like waves of scorching hot air. The harsh neon lights reflected off her face, highlighting the determination in her eyes. Today wasn't just another meeting. It was a battle she had to win. Her heart raced as she thought about what had just happened. She recalled every detail of the attack, the way Caldwell, a colleague she once respected, had acted irrationally and aggressively. Eleanor could not tolerate this abuse of power, and she knew that if she didn't take action right now, it wouldn't just happen once. She requested that the attack be documented, not just to protect herself, but also to safeguard others who might become victims in the future. "We can't let this happen again," she asserted, her voice ringing out strongly, leaving no room for doubt. The image of Caldwell, with his haughty eyes and defiant attitude, flashed in her mind. He seemed completely oblivious to the seriousness of his actions, and that made Eleanor feel more outraged than ever. She demanded that the surveillance camera be activated, wanting everything recorded, wanting the truth to be brought to light. Meanwhile, the skeptical glances from her colleagues made her feel like she was being mocked. The whispers, the furtive looks, everything seemed to be piling up in a cramped space, amplifying her sense of isolation. They didn't understand. They could never grasp what she was facing. They didn't know that Caldwell was not just a colleague, but a symbol of the abuse of power that had lingered far too long in their organization. She felt the injustice surrounding her like a heavy fog. But Eleanor couldn't let her colleagues' doubts hold her back. She had to stand firm, not just for herself, but for those who wouldn't have the strength to speak up. Bailiff Marcus Tate stood behind her, his face set with determination, embodying his loyalty. The warmth of his support gave Eleanor an extra boost of strength. Marcus was the only person she could trust in this moment. He had witnessed the entire incident, and together, they were resolved to bring the truth to light. She turned to look at him, feeling the unspoken encouragement in Marcus's gaze. His presence was like a solid wall, shielding her from the crashing waves of turmoil that were closing in. Caldwell, with a smug expression, stood there like a rock, showing no signs that he would take responsibility for his actions. His attitude left everyone around him feeling disheartened, but not Eleanor. She stepped closer, her heart filled with determination. "I won't let you get away with this," she thought to herself. Behind Caldwell's arrogance was a deeply flawed man, someone used to abusing power without facing any consequences. Eleanor was resolute in her mission to put an end to that. In Eleanor's mind, a battle is raging. She feels the weight of the pressure and responsibility she carries. She's not just fighting for herself, but for all those who have been abused, those who have no voice. The images of her colleagues, those who have suffered under Caldwell's tyranny, flash through her mind like a powerful motivation. She knows that if she doesn't stand up, no one else will. In that moment, Eleanor felt like a warrior. She knew that this battle wouldn't be easy, but with every beat of her heart, she affirmed that this was the right thing to do. She couldn't let doubt, and the cold stares of her colleagues hold her back. They might not believe in her, but she would prove that the truth would always find a way to be recognized. Eleanor had decided that she would not only document the attack but also place Caldwell under criminal investigation. This was not just a personal action, it was a message sent to the entire organization that no one is above the law, that power cannot be abused without facing consequences. She knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but with each step, she felt her strength growing. Justice would be served, and people like Caldwell would have no place in this world. Eleanor sat at her desk, the light from her desk lamp casting warm rays onto the white pages, where the Caldwell case files were spread out like pieces of a larger, yet-to-be-revealed puzzle. She carefully turned each page, her heart racing with excitement and anxiety. The suppressed complaints of abuse of power began to emerge, like ghosts from the past haunting the present. Each word on the page felt like a whisper, a warning about the injustices that so many had endured. The faces of the victims, those who had once placed their trust in the system, now appeared before her, reminding her of why she had chosen to pursue a career in journalism. She couldn't help but reflect on the biases she had faced throughout her career. As a woman in journalism, especially when tackling sensitive issues like power and abuse, she was often dismissed and looked down upon. Every time she tried to raise a concern, skeptical glances and questions, like "Are you sure?" would arise, making her feel like she was fighting not just against the truth, but against societal prejudices as well. But she refused to let herself back down. She learned to stand firm, to persevere in what she believed in, and now, before her lay an opportunity to expose the truth, to give a voice to the forgotten victims. As Eleanor continued to sift through the files, a crucial piece of information caught her attention. A local journalist she once knew had sent her a brief yet significant message. Caldwell had undeniable ties to the Chatham County District Attorney's Office. That message rang like an alarm bell in her mind, hinting at a protective network she had never considered. This connection was not merely a relationship. It was a sign that the issue she was facing was not just the abuse of one individual, but a larger system, a fortress built by those in power. It felt like a powerful wave crashing down, and Eleanor realized she wasn't alone in this fight. She had tapped into something greater, a struggle that was not just personal, but also held deep social significance. Like an explorer stepping into an uncharted world, she felt she was standing at the second peak of her adventure, where truths and secrets awaited discovery. Each page, every complaint she read, and every piece of information she gathered brought her closer to uncovering the mystery of the protection Caldwell had received. Eleanor gradually felt her initial fear transforming into a new kind of strength. She couldn't let prejudice and doubt hold her back. She was determined. She wouldn't just write about the complaints, but would shine a light on the dark things that Caldwell and those behind him had tried to hide. She began jotting down important points, mapping out the connections between Caldwell and the Chatham County District Attorney's Office, while linking them to the cases she had researched. She knew this wouldn't be easy. She might have to face intense pressure from those in power. But deep inside her, a fire of determination was blazing. She couldn't turn back. The memories of those times when she was pushed to the sidelines at work, when her male colleagues deemed her opinions not weighty enough, have now become the driving force that propels her forward. She's not just fighting for herself. She's fighting for those who have no voice, for those who have suffered in silence. She pauses for a moment, takes a deep breath to regain her composure. The world outside keeps spinning, but in this small space, she feels like she's standing at the threshold of a revolution. Eleanor knew that to execute this plan, she needed help. She needed to connect with others, journalists, lawyers, and even everyday people who had been affected by Caldwell's actions. She decided to hold a small meeting with her trusted colleagues, those who shared her vision. She understood that if they stood together, they could create change. The truth was not just an abstract concept. It was a powerful weapon, and they would use it to confront the system. As the light from the desk lamp illuminated the pages of the files, Eleanor felt her heart swell with hope. She was ready for this fight, a battle not just for the truth, but for justice for the forgotten victims. She knew challenges lay ahead, but now she was no longer alone. Eleanor stood in the vast expanse of her office, the light from the window illuminating the scattered papers on her desk. She felt a deep inner tremor as she recalled what Marcus and Vanessa Holt had shared. They were two close friends who had witnessed the injustice and suffering that their community had to endure. With tear-filled eyes, Vanessa recounted the story of a friend who had been abused by those in power, an innocent victim overlooked by the legal system. Marcus, with his warm, deep voice, asserted that they couldn't let this case slip away like so many others. Their story sparked a light in Eleanor's mind, like a torch guiding those who were searching for justice. Eleanor took a deep breath, feeling a surge of determination rising within her. She couldn't let these injustices continue without anyone standing up to fight. It had been far too long since she had witnessed scenes that her conscience could no longer accept. From her childhood days in Savannah, where the poor often endured discrimination and unfair treatment, to the recent incidents she had documented in her role as a journalist. Every story, every pain she had listened to was etched in her mind as a reminder that silence only amplified the suffering. Somehow, those memories ignited a fire within Eleanor, making it impossible for her to sit still. She decided that she would not just be a bystander, but would become a warrior for justice. She knew this fight wouldn't be easy. There would be times when she felt tired and discouraged. But she was ready. Before her lay a long, treacherous road, but the determination in her heart kept her steady. When the phone rang, Eleanor jumped. It was a call from the Malik family, one of the families she had been following for some time. They had endured so much pain and loss, yet they remained strong in spirit. The mother's voice, filled with sorrow but equally powerful, gave Eleanor a renewed sense of strength. "We believe in you, Eleanor. You are our hope. Don't give up." Those words were like a shot of spiritual medicine, igniting a new motivation within her. She felt her responsibility extending beyond herself, encompassing all those who had suffered injustice. After hanging up the phone, Eleanor looked out the window, where the sunlight was gradually fading, giving way to the encroaching darkness. But in her mind, the light still shone brightly. She recalled the time spent at her desk, digging for information, interviewing witnesses. Each story held its own unique power, and now she would not let anyone be forgotten. Eleanor decided to hold a press conference where she would announce what had happened and call for support from the community. She knew that this could get her into trouble, but that wasn't a reason for her to back down. Injustice wasn't just a personal issue, it was a societal one. She would stand up for those who couldn't defend themselves. As night fell, Eleanor spent hours preparing for the press conference. She studied every detail, from her outfit to her speech. She wanted everyone to see the sincerity in her eyes, to feel the pain she had witnessed, and, more importantly, to understand that they were not alone in this fight. She envisioned the faces of those who had been hurt, those who had lost their rights and equality. She would not let them be forgotten. Finally, as night fell, Eleanor felt an unusual sense of peace. She knew this was just the beginning of a long battle. She couldn't predict everything that was going to happen, but one thing she was certain of was that she would not give up. She would fight for the truth, for justice, and for all those who needed her voice. With that mindset, Eleanor drifted off to sleep, her heart filled with determination and hope. Eleanor sat in her office, the warm golden light from the desk lamp illuminating the photo she had just received. It was a picture of Malik, her son, playing in the park, a bright smile lighting up his little face. But what sent chills down her spine was the handwritten threat beneath the photo. Know your place. Her heart raced, waves of anxiety crashing in her chest. It felt like an invisible hand was tightening around her throat, making it hard for her to breathe. In the stillness of the moment, Eleanor realized that her family's safety was at stake. With no other choice, she decided to contact the Federal Bureau of Investigation to report the photo and request that they investigate its origins. Fear crept into every corner of her mind, but she knew she couldn't let that fear hold her back. Malik and her family were all she had. They were the reason she fought. As the call was made, her voice grew more determined than ever, even though tears threatened to spill from her eyes. The FBI promised to investigate immediately, but Eleanor couldn't sit still. Caught in a moment, suspended between the calm on the surface and the storm brewing inside, she turned to seek support from Marcus and Vanessa, her two closest friends who had always stood by her during her toughest times. They had witnessed the upheavals in her life and understood that in times of crisis, friendship is the greatest strength. When Marcus and Vanessa arrived, their eyes sparkled with worry but were also filled with determination. "We won't let this happen," Marcus asserted, his hand clenched tightly as if he wanted to pass strength to Eleanor. Vanessa nodded in agreement, her eyes filled with encouragement, making Eleanor feel less alone in this fight. Together they devised a plan, not just to protect their family, but also to uncover the person behind that photo. The bond between them grew stronger than ever, like an invisible thread pulling them closer together. In the days that followed, Eleanor felt clearly that her life had changed forever. She was forced to live in fear, but at the same time, she felt the love and support from her friends. They often came over not just to keep Malik safe, but also to create a warm atmosphere, helping her not to feel too alone in this fear. She reminisced about beautiful memories, the joyful days spent with family, when life was peaceful and filled with laughter. But now, the shadow of threat loomed over every one of those moments. Eleanor spent time researching and learning about the dangers that could come from faceless enemies. She realized that not only she, but many others were also facing similar situations. This made her feel an even stronger urge to take action, not just to protect her family, but also to help others in the community. She decided to get involved in safety awareness activities so everyone could stay alert and look out for one another. Still, she never let go of her worries about Malik. Every time she saw her son, the image of that threatening photo flashed in her mind, like a wound that would never heal. She frequently checked the windows and doors, feeling as if she were living in a horror movie. Every sound outside made her jump, and every shadow that passed by sent a chill down her spine. But she wouldn't allow herself to break down. She was determined to be stronger, not just for herself, but for Malik. One afternoon, as the sunlight slowly faded behind the tall buildings, Eleanor decided to take Malik out to play. She knew that they couldn't let fear imprison both of them. As they ran and played together in the park, Malik's laughter rang out like a gentle melody in the peaceful air. She felt a deep sense of happiness watching her son enjoy himself, but inside, her heart was heavy with unspoken worries. Despite all her fears, Eleanor was determined that her family would not be defeated. The battle was not just against an invisible enemy, but also a journey to find peace within her own soul. She understood that no matter what happened, love and unity would be the guiding light that helped them overcome every challenge. They would stand strong together, refusing to let any threat shake this family. Vanessa sat in the dim corner of a small cafe in the heart of the city, where the soft yellow light from the shimmering hanging lamps reflected off the rich, dark drops of coffee. She couldn't sit still, clutching the documents she had just obtained from a confidential source. The pages contained undeniable evidence of a massive corruption network stretching from the powerful offices in Caldwell to key figures in the judicial system. Prosecutor Gregory Vaughn, with his cunning and ruthlessness, along with Judge Walter Grayson, who everyone believed to be fair, were actually the main links in this chain of corruption. Eleanor, a seasoned investigator, was sitting at her desk in her office. In recent days, she had sensed that something was off. The cases she was following seemed to share strange commonalities, and during her search for information, she stumbled upon a case involving a journalist who had died under mysterious circumstances. His death had been shrouded in lies and manipulation by those in power. Eleanor felt the pain and injustice weighing heavily on her mind, like a dagger piercing her heart. She decided she couldn't just sit idly by. She had to do something to expose the truth. When Vanessa and Eleanor met for the first time at a secret meeting of anti-corruption activists, their eyes locked, and they recognized the power of determination. Vanessa, with documents in hand, made Eleanor feel like she was holding a ticking time bomb. "We can't let this go on," Vanessa said, her voice filled with passion. "We need to shed light on everything, not just for the victims, but for the values we stand for." Eleanor nodded in agreement. They decided to join forces, and from that moment on, a plan to expose the corruption network began to take shape. Both of them delved into the documents that Vanessa had gathered. The pages were filled with information about secret meetings, shady deals, and familiar names that loomed like demons in the shadows. Gregory Vaughn was not just a renowned prosecutor. He was also the one manipulating all the evidence to protect his own interests. Judge Walter Grayson, with his cold and authoritative demeanor, was the one who had signed unjust verdicts, shattering countless families in the process. As they gradually flipped through each page of the documents, Eleanor suddenly realized that even the smallest details could become clues to bring the truth to light. They began tracking the traces left by the characters in this network, from phone calls to secret meetings. They even sought out witnesses who could provide additional information. Step by step, they uncovered the connections between Caldwell, Gregory Vaughn, and Walter Grayson. At this moment, fear began to creep into their minds. They knew that those in power would never easily accept being exposed. Threats could arise at any moment. But Eleanor and Vanessa couldn't turn back. They were determined, not just for justice, but also for those who had endured too much suffering. On a rainy evening, as the streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, they had an encounter with a former police officer who had chosen to stand up for justice. He had once been part of the system but walked away after witnessing too much injustice. He provided them with crucial information, including a video capturing a secret meeting between Vaughn and Grayson. The scene in the video sent chills down their spines. They realized they were holding undeniable evidence to prosecute those behind the corruption network. After that meeting, the urgency and tension escalated. Eleanor and Vanessa decided they had to reveal the truth to the media. They reached out to a trusted journalist, someone they hoped would stand by them in this fight. However, they also knew that nothing would come easy. Anyone who dared to take on the powerful could pay the ultimate price with their own life. Under the dim streetlights, Eleanor and Vanessa stepped out of the cafe, their hearts heavy with anxiety, but also brimming with determination. They had come too far to turn back now. This web of corruption was not just a personal story. It was a significant issue that society as a whole needed to confront. Now, they were no longer isolated individuals but had become part of the fight for justice, a battle they would never abandon. Eleanor sat by the office window, sunlight streaming through the frosted glass. But that warm feeling seemed unable to chase away the chill that had settled deep within her. Lately, her life felt completely turned upside down. An article published in a local newspaper had sparked a wave of harsh criticism, accusing her of misconduct at work. Even though she knew those accusations were entirely fabricated, the doubt from those around her made her feel as if she were teetering on the edge of isolation. Her colleagues, once close friends, now kept their distance. They turned their backs, as if her very presence could drag them into the web of malicious gossip. Eleanor felt as though she had been pushed out of the warm embrace of her co-workers, a place where she had always found support and encouragement. Meetings and lunch breaks had transformed into lonely moments, filled only with whispers and the wary glances of others directed at her. The pressure from public opinion wasn't just coming from her colleagues. The mayor of Savannah, a powerful woman with significant influence in the community, had also begun to show her indifference. Their meetings no longer took place in a spirit of collaboration, but had turned into interrogation sessions. The mayor relentlessly posed tough questions, casting doubts on Eleanor's leadership abilities. This made her feel as if she were fighting not just for her personal honor, but for the entire career she had worked so hard to build. On those long nights, when darkness enveloped everything, Eleanor often felt exhaustion and despair. Negative thoughts surged, pushing her into a quagmire. She wondered if she was strong enough to weather this storm. But just when everything seemed to be crumbling, a faint light appeared. Malik, her close friend and colleague, had decided not to abandon her in this tough time. Malik had always been the one to listen, the solid shoulder that Eleanor needed during her darkest times. He was not just a friend, but also a powerful source of motivation. That day, as they strolled through the park, Malik told Eleanor that she needed to believe in herself. He reminded her of the successes she had achieved, of her relentless efforts at work, and of the importance of standing strong against the storms. "Eleanor, don't let what others say make you lose yourself," Malik asserted with sincerity in his eyes. "I know who truly has the ability, and I believe you can overcome all of this. Remember, you're not alone." Those words of encouragement were like a shot of mental strength, helping Eleanor regain some of the power she had lost. She decided not to let herself be defeated by the outside pressures. Instead, she began to seek ways to prove her innocence, not just to others, but also to herself. She started gathering evidence, looking for people who could testify to her honesty, and above all, she was determined not to let these false accusations break her spirit. Every day that passes, Eleanor grows stronger. She starts getting involved in community activities, helping those in need, and through this process, she realizes she's not alone. She meets people with similar stories, those who have faced hardships and found ways to rise after their falls. These experiences not only help her feel less lonely, but also make her more optimistic about the future. Even though there were still some skeptical eyes on her, Eleanor knew she had regained her motivation and confidence. This battle wasn't just about honor, it was about proving to herself that she could overcome any challenge. And with Malik's support, she believed that, in the midst of the storm, the light at the end of the tunnel was within reach. Eleanor stood in front of the courtroom door, her heart swirling with a mix of emotions. She never imagined that the information she had just uncovered would leave her mind spinning like this. The complaint letters she had found, the documents proving that Vaughn was not just a colleague but also the one who had hidden the truth about Caldwell, felt like a knife stabbing right into her trust. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself before stepping inside, but the anxiety clung to her like a shadow. As Eleanor stepped inside, the room was flooded with light, yet it felt as cold as the lies she was about to confront. Just a glance from the court official sitting across from her was enough to send a shiver down her spine. He, a stern-looking man, regarded her with a chilling gaze, as if he were scrutinizing every move she made. Eleanor understood that this confrontation was not merely a discussion, it was a fight for her very survival. She opened her mouth, but the words felt like they were stuck in her throat. The complaint about Caldwell has been noted, but we need to consider several factors before we can take action, the official said in a dismissive tone, as if he didn't care about the truth she was trying to present. Eleanor felt a surge of anger rising within her, but she knew that if she wasn't careful, everything would turn against her. She decided not to back down, striving to hold her ground. But you can't just stand there and ignore the evidence I've gathered. Vaughn has hidden the truth. He's responsible for this. Eleanor's voice grew stronger, but she could also feel the threat lurking behind every word from that official. He leaned back, a smirk appearing on his lips, but his eyes were like sharp daggers, ready to strike anyone who dared to oppose him. Don't forget that there are people in this industry who don't like those who dig into unnecessary issues. You should think carefully before continuing down this path. His warning hung over her like a ghost, making Eleanor's heart race. She hesitated, but then decided not to let fear control her. She had come too far to turn back now. As Eleanor stepped out of the courthouse, her mind was still swirling with thoughts. She felt as if she were standing in the eye of a storm, with the chilling winds of threat blowing all around her. But she also knew she wasn't alone in this fight. Vanessa, her companion and a key witness, had promised to stand by her side. They had faced tough moments together, and now Vanessa's support was something Eleanor needed more than ever. Sitting in a small cafe near the courthouse, Eleanor gazed out the window, where golden leaves fell like tears of autumn. Vanessa arrived, bringing a breath of fresh air amidst the worries weighing heavily on Eleanor. "I found some more documents about Grayson," Vanessa said, her tone filled with determination. "We need to make everyone see that what Caldwell is doing is unacceptable." Eleanor felt a new fire ignite within her. The evidence Vanessa brought was like a shot of adrenaline for her mind. They meticulously examined each document, each photo, each video that Vanessa had gathered. Every piece only strengthened Eleanor's resolve. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for all those who had been hurt by Caldwell and Vaughn's wrong decisions. As the lights in the cafe began to dim, Eleanor and Vanessa knew they were ready for a bigger battle. They would not only confront those who suppressed the truth, but also face the fears and barriers that society had erected. With each passing moment, Eleanor felt the power of the truth coursing through her veins. She had made up her mind. Nothing could hold her back anymore. This fight was not just hers, but for all those who had ever been oppressed, abandoned. And so, she stepped into the darkness with a new light, a fierce belief that justice would ultimately prevail. Eleanor stood in the middle of the vast auditorium, where the lights illuminated every angle of the tense and expectant faces. She had called for a public hearing, and now the attention of the entire nation was focused on her. Inside, she felt like she was facing a battle not just for herself, but for the millions of others crushed by corruption and injustice. She knew that this decision could change her life forever, but she was also acutely aware that it was an opportunity to bring the truth to light. The list of 12 corrupt individuals, including Vaughn and Grayson, is ready. It's not just a list. It's a symbol of the pain, disappointment, and shattered dreams of countless people. She recalls the long, restless nights, the tears that fell as she thought about those who have suffered because of this system. She is determined not to let fear or pressure hold her back. As she steps up to the podium, she feels the powerful beat of her heart, a reminder that this is the moment to fight. As Eleanor began to speak, the sound of her voice echoed in the space. She wasn't just naming names. She was sharing the stories behind each person on that list. She described a single mother who had to struggle to raise her child, a veteran returning from war only to witness loved ones suffering due to the corruption of the powerful. Each word she uttered felt like an arrow aimed directly at those who had abused their power, and the audience's gaze seemed unable to leave her. When she confronted Vaughn, it felt like time stood still. Their eyes locked, filled with tension. Vaughn, with his smug demeanor, tried to appear calm, but Eleanor knew deep down he was scared. She held undeniable proof of the manipulations and tricks he had used to seize the rights and assets of the vulnerable. "I'm not just standing here for myself," she said, her voice unwavering. "I'm standing here for all the people you've crushed." The hearing captured the attention of the national media, with cameras focused on her, recording every tense and emotional moment. Everyone wanted to know what would happen next. They weren't just watching a hearing. They were witnessing a battle of righteousness against corruption. Eleanor felt the power of empathy from the audience, like a powerful wave sweeping over her soul. The applause erupted, not just as support for her, but as the voice of millions yearning for justice. Amidst the tense atmosphere, Eleanor didn't just present evidence. She recounted secret phone calls, carefully preserved recordings, and clandestine meetings that no one knew about. She laid bare every trick of Vaughn and Grayson, step by step, revealing every tiny detail they thought they could hide forever. She saw the panic in Vaughn's eyes, a small victory in her heart, but she wouldn't allow herself to stop. In the final moments of her presentation, Eleanor decided to make a powerful call to action. "We can't keep letting the corrupt manipulate our lives. We need to stand up, come together, and demand justice. Let our voices be heard." Her words struck like a blow against the ice of silence, leaving everyone in the auditorium unable to hold back their applause, unable to refrain from shouting her name. As the hearing came to a close, Eleanor felt as if she had just shed a massive weight. But she knew this was only the beginning. The system was still in place, and the fight against corruption was far from over. Yet, in that moment, she felt the power of unity, of people sharing the same ideals and aspirations. She had ignited a fire in the hearts of everyone, and now the darkness of corruption was slowly being pushed back by the light of truth. Eleanor fought not just for herself, but for all those who had ever been abandoned. She believed that with every step she took, with every powerful word she spoke, they would get closer to a fairer world, where everyone was treated justly and deservedly. She turned her back on the auditorium, her heart filled with determination, knowing that the journey ahead would be challenging, but she would never be alone. Caldwell sat alone in the empty office, the dim light from the window reflecting off the whiteboards covered in notes. Just days before, this place had been the hub of lively discussions, creative ideas, and seamless collaboration. But now the atmosphere was heavy, seemingly quieter than ever. Caldwell's train of thought was interrupted by a soft knock at the door, but no one came in. He had once been an integral part of the team, a respected and trusted colleague. Now he could feel the isolation creeping in, like shadows closing around him. As time went on, Caldwell felt the growing distance from those who once called him a friend. The cold stares, the half-hearted greetings, and the empty chairs beside him made him feel like he was standing in the middle of a grand yet desolate painting. He started receiving threats from those he had once considered his protectors. They no longer shielded him. Instead, the hostility and resentment from former colleagues crashed over him like a massive wave, drowning his self-esteem and confidence. Caldwell reminisced about the early days when he first joined the company, a time when everything was bright and full of hope. He had been involved in numerous successful projects and was once seen as a leader in the fields he was passionate about. But the change in people's hearts, like a powerful storm, swept away everything he had built. He wondered why these things were happening, whether it was due to past mistakes or if he simply no longer fit in the new environment. As his mind was filled with anxiety and self-blame, Eleanor, the CEO of the company, received news about Caldwell's situation. She had always held him in high regard, but now the reports of his decline and isolation weighed heavily on her heart. Eleanor knew she had to take action. She decided to meet with Caldwell in person to better understand what was going on. She couldn't let someone who had contributed so much to the company fall into a crisis without support. As Eleanor stepped into Caldwell's office, the atmosphere grew heavier than ever. She saw him sitting there, his face gaunt and his eyes hollow. Part of her wanted to rush over and embrace him, but she knew that wouldn't do any good. Instead, she chose to approach him slowly. She sat down in the chair across from him, creating a safe space between them. They used to be close colleagues, but now the distance had made their relationship feel awkward. Eleanor began to talk about the wonderful things Caldwell had done for the company, reminiscing about the memorable moments they had shared. But Caldwell just listened, saying nothing. He no longer felt like he was a part of what Eleanor was talking about. All he could see were the blank whiteboards, the empty chairs, and the overwhelming sense of loneliness that surrounded him. Deep down, he realized that the collapse wasn't just about the job. It was about who he was as a person, about the values he once believed in. The tone of their conversation slowly shifted from joyful memories to deep sadness. Eleanor could feel the despair in every word Caldwell spoke. He was no longer the strong, confident man she once knew. He felt as if he had lost everything, and now all that remained were the shattered pieces of a dream that had vanished. He didn't know what to do to lift himself up, especially when even his former colleagues had turned their backs on him. Eleanor decided not to give up. She convinced Caldwell that they could find light in the darkest situations. They needed to plan to regain the trust of their colleagues and restore his position in the company. Although Caldwell couldn't see the way forward clearly, the light from Eleanor's sincerity and effort shone like a glimmer of hope in the pitch-black night. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least he no longer had to face it alone. As Eleanor stood up to leave, Caldwell felt a surge of new energy within him. He knew he needed to fight not just for himself, but for those who had once believed in and supported him. The collapse wouldn't be the end. It would be the beginning of a new journey, an opportunity to rediscover himself. He looked out the window where the sunlight began to break through the clouds, and a flicker of new hope ignited in his heart. Caldwell stood in the middle of the vast parking lot, where the neon lights sparkled off the cars parked closely together. He felt the chilling air and the tension that hung thick around him. Even though the day was bright and sunny, inside him, everything felt dark and gloomy. He had meticulously planned every step, but now all those calculations seemed to have vanished like morning mist under the sun. A police car suddenly appeared, its siren lights flashing brilliantly, and from inside, uniformed officers stepped out with a determined look. Caldwell felt like everything was crumbling around him. He had no way out. The freedom he once longed for was now a distant dream. He had been a powerful man, but now a wave of helplessness washed over his mind. As the police officers approached, he realized there was no choice left but to surrender. He saw the determination in their eyes, and it made him feel unsteady. Their steady footsteps drew closer like a final verdict, and in that moment, Caldwell understood that it was all over. Meanwhile, Eleanor sat in her office, the stark white walls mirroring her current mood. She received a tip from a reliable source that Caldwell had been arrested. While a part of her felt relieved that he was finally facing consequences, Another part was weighed down by anxiety. She knew the battle wasn't over. Her enemy was still out there, and anyone who fell into his hands could easily become a pawn in the dangerous game he had been orchestrating for so long. She could feel the tension in the air, as if a storm was brewing just on the horizon. Eleanor couldn't forget the days she faced him, the moments when the truth was hidden behind lies and ruthless calculations. She had to bravely stand up, not just to protect herself, but also to shield those around her. Her heart felt heavy when she thought of the people who had once been victims of Caldwell, and she promised herself that she wouldn't let that happen again. She sprang to her feet, determined not to let relief distract her. She would keep a close eye on the developments and prepare for what was coming next. Caldwell was escorted into the police car, his figure like a faint shadow against the bright lights of the city. He had once been a charismatic man, but now everything had changed. He felt like a fallen leaf, devoid of life, left only with memories of the power he once held. Chaotic thoughts raced through his mind, but the only thing anchoring him to reality was the image of Eleanor. She was the only one who had dared to stand up to him. He wondered if she felt victorious, or if this was just a fleeting moment of peace. As the police car pulled away from the parking lot, Eleanor stood at a distance, her eyes tracking every movement. She watched Caldwell being taken away, and a wave of emotions washed over her. Memories of the past flooded back times he had deceived and manipulated her. But what hurt her the most was the realization that this battle wasn't just about them. It was about the others they had both affected. She knew Caldwell wouldn't give up easily, and she had to brace herself for the worst. Caldwell was imprisoned, but in his mind, the plans were still unfolding. He couldn't accept defeat. He couldn't let Eleanor win so easily. He began to think about how to escape this situation, crafting a new plan in his head. He had learned that patience is a powerful weapon, and he would wait for the right moment to act. Eleanor returned to the office where everything remained the same, but inside her, everything had changed forever. She decided that she wouldn't just sit back and wait. She would find a way to stop Caldwell once and for all. She knew this was just the beginning of a new battle, a battle that she had to lead. She couldn't let the bad guys run rampant, and she wouldn't allow anyone to fall into their hands again. While Caldwell was still pondering his own plans, Eleanor was ready for what lay ahead. They both knew that a new battle was about to unfold, and they would have to face challenges greater than ever before. This fight wasn't just theirs. It belonged to all those who had suffered because of the misguided choices of a schemer. They would not back down, and this war would not end until one side truly emerged victorious. In the gloomy atmosphere of the office, the flickering light from the neon sign made the documents on the desk sharper than ever. Eleanor sat there, her hands trembling as she held the pieces of evidence that she and Vanessa had gathered over the past weeks. She sighed, feeling the heavy weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. The Caldwell trial was about to begin, and everything seemed to be at a critical moment. She knew that she was not just representing herself, but also all the other victims who were waiting for justice. Vanessa, the indispensable companion, stood beside her, her eyes glued to the documents. "We need to make sure every detail is spot on," she said, her tone resolute. Together, they had spent hours dissecting every piece of evidence, from legal documents to witness testimonies. With each read-through, Eleanor's anxiety surged higher. She felt as if she were teetering on the edge of something monumental, a battle not just against an enemy, but also against her own inner turmoil. But it wasn't just the documents that had her worried. Eleanor had received numerous threats from those behind the incident. Anonymous letters filled with venomous words and late-night phone calls kept her on edge. However, what made her stronger was the support from the community around her. They organized meetings, wrote letters to the authorities, and most importantly, stood by her during the toughest times. The feeling of not being alone, of having a powerful force backing her up, gave her the strength to carry on. In the midst of those tense moments, a special moment unfolded. Malik, Eleanor's close friend, visited her on a rainy afternoon. He walked in with a bag of hot tea, and its aroma lightened the atmosphere. "We need to talk," Malik said, sitting down beside her. He didn't need to say much, but his presence was enough to ease some of the anxiety weighing on Eleanor's heart. They shared old stories and joyful memories together, and in that moment, she felt as if every burden was slowly being lifted away. Malik looked into Eleanor's eyes, his gaze filled with understanding. "You're not just fighting for yourself," he said. "You're the voice for so many others. They need you." His words struck her like a jolt of electricity, fueling her heart with strength. Thinking of the others, the ones she had met and listened to their stories, Eleanor felt she couldn't back down. She wasn't just an individual in the flow of life, she was part of a larger battle. As the trial approached, Eleanor and Vanessa worked harder than ever. They spent hours preparing for every question the plaintiff would ask, every possible scenario that could arise. Each evening they left the office with heavy footsteps, but their hearts were filled with determination. They understood that even the slightest slip-up could jeopardize all their efforts. The tension in the air grew thicker as the day of the trial drew near. Along with the preparations, Eleanor felt the support from everyone around her. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers came to her side, bringing meals, words of encouragement, and portraits of the victims. They organized a prayer vigil where people gathered together, praying for justice and peace. That image was etched in Eleanor's mind, reminding her that she was not just fighting for herself, but for an entire community. As night fell, Eleanor sat in her office, gazing out the window. The streetlights flickered in the darkness, and her heart swelled with hope. Even though the battle ahead was fraught with challenges, she knew she wasn't alone. She had Vanessa, Malik, and the entire community by her side. And with every step she took, she would not just be a fighter, but a trailblazer for justice. The Caldwell trial will take place tomorrow, and Eleanor is ready. Her preparation is not just about the evidence, but also about the courage and solidarity of everyone. She will not only fight for herself, but for all those who have ever been hurt. She will stand firm, like a lighthouse in the storm, and that light will guide those in need. In the federal court of Savannah, a heavy and tense atmosphere enveloped the entire courtroom. Every gaze was fixed on the defendant, Caldwell, the man who had plunged the lives of many into darkness. After weeks of debate, everything had come to a head. Caldwell faced 5 serious charges, and the truth about his actions was slowly being revealed. The air grew still as Eleanor, with trembling hands but a resolute mind, stepped up to the witness stand. She looked around, seeing the familiar faces of those who had once been victims of Caldwell, her heart filled with pain and determination. Eleanor began to recount what had happened on that fateful night. Her voice resonated, each word touching the hearts of those listening. She recalled how Caldwell had attacked her, the endless nightmares, and the overwhelming panic that surged within her. Each memory unfolded like a vivid painting, etching deep into her mind the unforgettable scars. But beyond the pain, Eleanor wanted to convey a message of strength and resilience. She wanted everyone to see that even when hurt, they could rise again, and that was the greatest power a person could possess. As Eleanor spoke, the eyes of many in the room shimmered with empathy. They knew all too well the pain she had endured and the courage it took for her to stand up for justice. They understood that this was not just a trial, but a battle to reclaim honor and truth. When Eleanor paused, tears had streamed down her cheeks, yet her gaze remained bright, reflecting an unshakable strength. And then, the emotions in the room reached a boiling point when Caldwell's client, Vaughn, stood up. He had always been the one to defend Caldwell, but now, the truth had made it impossible for him to continue. Vaughn, with eyes filled with regret, announced his resignation. He could no longer protect someone he knew was a criminal. Vaughn's decision was not just a turning point in his career, but also a sign that the light of truth had pierced through the darkness. Meanwhile, Grayson, the head of the investigation department, was also suspended from his duties. Caldwell's actions not only shattered Eleanor's life, but also undermined the trust of an entire community. Grayson, who once took great pride in his work, now felt overwhelming shame as he realized that his shortcomings in the investigation had contributed to the suffering the victims endured. He knew that the wrong decisions could never be undone, but he still hoped that the suspension would give him the time to reflect on what had transpired. As the trial continued, the jury began to deliberate on the evidence and testimonies. A heavy silence filled the room, but inside each juror, a battle was raging. They all understood that their responsibility was not just to decide the fate of one person, but to determine the very essence of justice in society. Each of them carried the fear of making the wrong decision, yet at the same time they felt a deep yearning to stand on the side of justice. Finally, when the jury returned, the atmosphere in the room became more suffocating than ever. Everyone was on edge, anxiously awaiting the verdict. As the jury representative stood up, a heavy silence enveloped the courtroom. "We find Caldwell guilty on 5 counts, he said, each word slicing through the stillness like a knife. Applause erupted from the victim's side, but there were also tears of relief and hope. Caldwell, with a face stripped of its arrogance, was left only with despair. It was Eleanor's testimony and the undeniable evidence that had pulled him down from his position of power. She had succeeded in bringing justice not only for herself, but for all those who had suffered under his tyranny. As the trial came to a close, the afternoon sun streamed through the window, signaling that a new chapter was beginning. Eleanor, no longer just a victim but a strong woman who had reclaimed her voice, stood there among her friends and family, feeling the power of unity and love. Justice had been served, and although the road ahead was still long, she now believed that each step would pave the way for new hopes. After the shocking case sent ripples through the entire city of Savannah, the consequences spread like waves across a still lake, affecting not just those directly involved, but also transforming the entire social landscape here. Eleanor, who bravely stood up to fight for justice, not only received accolades from the community, but also became a symbol for the oppressed. However, her newfound prominence also brought along fresh threats, suspicious glances, and hostility from those who resisted change. First, the city government, under pressure from public opinion and human rights organizations, decided to establish a reform committee. The committee's goal was not only to investigate the case, but also to review 140 other convictions from the past, many of which people believed had been tainted by serious mistakes made by the Savannah Police Department. Federal oversight was also imposed, forcing police officers to face more scrutiny than ever before. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the city grew tense, as everyone anxiously awaited the results of the investigation. Eleanor, while enduring immense mental pressure, never backed down. She often walked through familiar streets where people had gradually come to recognize and respect her. Little children would often run up to her, grabbing her hand and asking about the stories they had heard, about bravery and perseverance. But deep inside Eleanor's mind, anxiety never ceased to haunt her. She knew that this fame brought not only glory, but also made her a target for those looking to protect their own interests. One afternoon, as the golden sunlight streamed down onto the streets, Eleanor received an unwanted call. On the other end was a cold voice, emphasizing that she should stop her actions. She knew this wasn't the first time, but this time it felt more serious. She couldn't let fear hold her back, but she also couldn't ignore the warnings. A wave of loneliness surged within her, yet she decided to share her concerns with her group of friends. Eleanor's group of friends, who had stood by her during protests and justice campaigns, held an emergency meeting at the famous Forsyth Park. There, they gathered to discuss what had happened and the next steps for the movement. As everyone shared their own stories, a powerful sense of unity began to take shape. They realized that Eleanor was not just an individual, but a symbol of a larger fight, a fight against injustice. Time passed, and the case gradually fell into the spotlight of national attention. The media continuously updated information about the investigation, and federal oversight made many individuals involved more cautious in their actions. This led to a wave of reactions from members of the Savannah Police Department who felt threatened by the changes. Some chose to openly express their dissent, while others quietly sought ways to protect their interests. However, while the debates raged on, Eleanor remained steadfast in the path she had chosen. She knew that change was never easy, and sometimes it required enduring harsh challenges. She had begun to rewrite her story, not just to share with the world what she had been through, but also to encourage others to stand up and speak their truth. One day, as she sat in her favorite little coffee shop, sunlight streaming through the window, Eleanor noticed a middle-aged couple intently reading an article about the case. They occasionally glanced her way, their eyes filled with admiration and respect. It was in that moment that she realized her efforts were not in vain. Even though society was still in chaos, every step taken, every voice raised, had the power to change the world. Finally, the day the Reform Committee announced the results of their investigation arrived. The atmosphere in the city became tense, with everyone focused on the large screens, where journalists and committee members would reveal the crucial findings. Moments passed like centuries, and when the first pieces of information were disclosed, the truth left many in shock. There were serious errors in the investigation process, unjust verdicts, and a system that needed to be thoroughly reformed. Eleanor stood in the middle of the crowd, her heart racing, not from anxiety, but because she knew she had done the right thing. She had bravely stood up, and now the consequences of that action would not just affect her, but would ripple through the entire community. Savannah was on the path to change, and Eleanor would not stop moving forward until all the best things came to this place. Eleanor stood in front of the mirror, gazing at her own reflection. She had endured a lot of pain, shed countless tears, and experienced moments of glory during her time on the Georgia Justice Committee. But now, the decision to resign had fully matured. She no longer wanted to continue in a system that she felt couldn't be changed from within. "It's time," she told herself. "It's time to pass on my legacy to the next generation." She understood that change didn't just come from those in power, but also from young souls, those who carried dreams and ideals within them. Before leaving the office for the last time, Eleanor wrote a brief letter to her colleagues. In it, she emphasized the importance of listening to the voices of the community and encouraged them to stand up and fight for what they believe in. With those thoughts in her heart, Eleanor left the building, filled with hope. She breathed in the fresh air of Atlanta, the city where she had spent most of her life fighting for justice. As Eleanor returned to Pooler, the place where she had grown up, the familiar sights unfolded before her, but now they carried a new meaning. Everything remained the same, yet she had changed. She was welcomed with warm hugs from family and old friends, but it seemed They still didn't grasp the person she had become. Eleanor felt a heaviness in her heart as she recalled the battles she had fought, the people she had helped, and the sacrifices she had made. When Eleanor met Malik, their eyes locked in a wave of memories flooding back. Malik, who had always been by her side through thick and thin, stood there with a warm smile, like a guiding light for Eleanor in the darkest nights. They strolled around the neighborhood, the place where they had shared beautiful childhood memories. Malik wasn't just a friend. He was a part of her soul, someone she knew would always support her in any decision she made. Throughout the conversation, Malik listened intently to every story Eleanor shared about her experiences at the Justice Commission. He understood that resigning wasn't just a personal decision, it was a powerful message to the younger generation that they could achieve something greater. "Do you think many people will follow in your footsteps?" Malik asked, his eyes filled with hope. Eleanor smiled, confident that young people would learn to harness their own power, and she would be the one to guide them on that path. The scenery of Pooler gradually shifts to dusk, the pale golden sunlight gently illuminating the familiar streets. Eleanor feels as if all the pain and struggles she has endured are being compensated by these peaceful moments with Malik. They sit together on the porch, where they once gazed at the stars during those sweltering summer nights. Now, those stars seem to shine brighter and more beautifully with her best friend by her side. When Eleanor returned home, she felt a fresh sense of purpose in her heart. She knew she had made the right decision by resigning, and that her legacy would not just be about what she had accomplished, but also about igniting a spark in the hearts of young people. The values she had fought to uphold would live on in them, like a flame that would never go out. The next day, an article was published praising Eleanor's efforts and encouraging young people to get involved in social activities. Malik sat in the cafe, reading the article with a heart full of pride. He felt the power of words and knew that what Eleanor had done would spark a new wave in the community. She hadn't just resigned, she had created an opportunity for others to stand up and voice their opinions. As the light of a new day broke, Eleanor stood by the window, gazing at the sky. She felt a deep sense of peace within her and a strong determination to continue her work. Even though she might no longer hold a position of power, she would always be a champion for justice, a guiding light for future generations. The legacy Eleanor left behind wasn't just about what she had accomplished, but about igniting faith and hope in the hearts of those around her. She knew that the journey had only just begun, and that the future would be brighter with young souls daring to dream and take action. Eleanor sat on the porch, the gentle sunlight streaming down, casting long shadows on the brick floor. She watched Malik playing with the neighborhood kids, their laughter echoing throughout the Savannah streets. It was a peaceful scene, but deep inside, Eleanor was stirred by profound thoughts. The journey she and the community had been on was anything but easy. From the early days when she decided to stand up for justice, to the gradual breaking down of barriers and invisible walls. Step by step, Eleanor felt clearly that justice wasn't a destination. It was a long, challenging journey. The memories of the protests, the community meetings, and the tears shed over the pain caused by injustice remain vivid in her mind. Eleanor recalls those who stood by her side in this fight, those who didn't hesitate to rise up despite the threats and pressures from outside. Together, they ignited a flame of hope, making the entire community realize that, although the road ahead is long, nothing can extinguish the desire for a better life. Looking at Malik, she felt the joy in the boy's eyes. His bright smile was a testament to the power of change. The Savannah community was no longer a place where fears and silence were buried. Open dialogues and concrete action plans were gradually taking shape, bringing hope for future generations. Eleanor knew that every game, every laugh of the children was a seed for a brighter future. She stood up, stepped out of the porch to immerse herself in the vibrant atmosphere of the afternoon. The children were running around, playing joyfully without a care, as if they were crafting their own story, a story free from the shadows of injustice. Eleanor decided to join them, to feel the power of joy, of unity. She wasn't just a leader. She was a part of this community, where everyone could find their voice. As night began to fall, the lights from the surrounding houses started to twinkle, and Eleanor sat on the porch, a sense of peace washing over her. She reflected on all they had been through, the battles fought not just for justice, but for the dignity of every individual. She found strength in the stories of those who had stood up, those who had bravely spoken the truth. Together, they had created a storm of hope that shattered the walls of indifference. Under the bright moonlight, Eleanor felt the changes taking place. The Savannah community was no longer a place filled with injustice. It was gradually becoming a model of unity and mutual respect. She saw faces that had once been gloomy now radiating with life, their eyes shining with hope for the future. Meetings and discussions no longer brought fear, but rather opportunities for everyone to come together and build a better society. Eleanor realized that justice isn't something that can be achieved overnight. It's an ongoing journey where every step requires perseverance and effort. She had witnessed the seeds being sown, and now they were sprouting, bringing life to every corner of Savannah. She felt a sense of pride as she saw her community transforming, gradually becoming a place where fairness and compassion are celebrated. As the children played in the dim light, Eleanor smiled. She knew that, although the road ahead was long and filled with challenges, with a heart full of hope and a spirit that would never give up, this community would never stop moving forward. She had decided that this journey would not end here, but would continue to be written by the generations to come, those who would inherit and build upon what she and others had started. In that moment, Eleanor felt a profound joy, a fierce belief that no matter how tough the challenges ahead, justice would always be the guiding light for them. She looked up at the starry sky, her heart overflowing with hope for a bright future, where everyone could live in peace and fairness. Thank you for joining Legendary Narratives on this emotional journey of Eleanor Brooks. From a painful slap to the blazing fire of justice, she has shown that courage and unity can transform an entire community. This story is not just about triumphing over injustice, but also a reminder that each of us has the power to make a difference. Please leave a like if you feel inspired, and don't forget to subscribe to the Legendary Narratives channel so you won't miss out on the next meaningful stories. Share your thoughts in the comments about what moved you the most. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on new journeys where legends are created. Wishing you a wonderful day.